Cultural memory studies organizes the study of what literature is, quite like how literary theory does. Any conversation around theory or a methodology of reading literature must ideally entail a reconstruction of what literature is. The understanding of what literature is untenable. Or, in other words, it shifts with the passage of time from being liberal humanist into being materialistic into being phenomenological into being heuristic. It is by its very nature a destabilizing object of study. Literature affects the world, or in other words, literature can create worlds, or literature can be shaped by social context. And this is precisely how literature shapes itself from being idealistic into being materialistic. The understanding of what literature is, in that sense, shifts from it being pragmatic into being non pragmatic, encapsulated or restaged in the form of these lines. Does literature create worlds, or do worlds create literature? And if they do create worlds, and if worlds create literature, whose literature and whose worlds do these writings create? The beginning or the burgeoning or growth of English studies could be tangentially connected to the decline or the failure in religion with the advancement in science and technology and with social change. The sacred is in that sense profane. The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci and its reinterpretation in the contemporary times is a significant form of reference to understand the shift in worldviews and the reorganizing perspectives around religion. Um, Religion works well, or it worked well for a point in time in Europe with its ability to integrate or to organize with images, symbols, habit, ritual, and mythology. But understand, religion in the British Isles or in the whole of Europe is no longer that cement that could bind the peasant, the liberal middle class, or for that matter, the theological intellectual. Watch Luther, because that could be a significant point of reference for you as learners to understand how England shifts from being, or the whole of Europe shifts from being Catholic into being reformers. Um, And to historicize this, and to historicize the growth of literary studies, a significant moment could be this early professor in Oxford who opens his lecture with a comment that England is sick and English literature must save it. English literature now has a threefold or triple function to serve, to delight and instruct, to save souls, and to heal states. And on account of simply having replaced religion, the sense in which we inherit it is ideological. Look at the line: if the masses are not thrown a few novels, they may react by throwing up a few barricades. Literary studies or a training in literature is then at that point in time supposed to be training the masses in disinterestedness. It is supposed to humanize the middle class savage with an aesthetic education. And English studies or literary studies at that point in time, in some senses, becomes the antidote to political bigotry and ideological extremism. Religion carried on the task that religion Literature carried on the task that religion left off. It affected emotions, it built on experiences. Literature did encourage plural thought, it encouraged more than one point of view than that of their masters. It trained sensibilities to avoid political action and militancy. If the masses couldn't put together a literary masterpiece, they found pleasure in the thought that others like them were doing it. Like religion, literature was shaped by emotions and experiences, but whose experiences made literature and whose feelings did it affect must be something that one must consciously problematize. Literature conveyed timeless truths, distracting masses from their immediate commitments. Arnold, in fact, dissolves the doctrinal bits of religion into poetically suggestive sonorities. Three suggestive moments that stage culture and the textual reconstruction of it in an interplay between the past and the present would be the shift in reading Homer, Seneca and Cicero, into reading Shakespeare, Milton, Pope, Wordsworth, and Eliot. And this shift in consideration may be inconsequential if Britain may not have been at the center of a global empire. Maybe the story of Uttanapishtim, the Babylonian epic, would have shaped our worldviews, or a Sanskritist literary tradition would have shaped our worlds, or Persian writings would have mapped our worlds. It is English and its imperial status and the territorial control that it wields in some senses that transforms into a powerful global institution. Reading or textuality becomes English when the literature in question is Australian or Canadian or Indian. The largest publishing market for literary discussion is in English. And this cultural misconstrual of the local in favor of the universal continues for a while until the English tradition is replaced by The indigenous literatures, namely Canadian, Australian, African, Indian, reasserting their post imperial sense of national and cultural identity. This reconstruction of textuality in the form of mapping indigenous identities, in some sense, brings us into an interplay between the past and the present to forge a new set of identities. Memories allow you to make sense of the world, your name, how you identify with the world, your immediate identification markers, the school that you went to, the college that you go to, the religion that you identify with, the class to which you belong, in some sense allows you to, in the functional fashion, navigate space and time. What we do and how we do things are shaped by these memories that we hold. Memories, in some sense, has a futuristic quality to it, and it consciously raises questions around what the collective remembers as against individual subjective memories, and the interplay that's at work between memories at the micro and the macro levels create and recreate identities. The non alignment that's at work, or the slippages between these individual subjective memories as against collective overarching memories, that is what defines knowledge, power, historiographies. Consider, for an example, W.E.B. Du Bois's conversations around Negro art and the contradiction that he presents in terms of the overarching narrative around the apartheid, around indigenous African American cultural art practices, define their sense of self in a certain way. So as to say that it's only that significant history of a marginalization that counts in comparison to their everyday experiences of life. It's only the wrench of existence that counts in comparison to their um, everyday life, and the choice that is made to politicize that history of apartheid continuously over these micro everyday experiences, that creates an identity of a certain kind, or an identity of sorts. And therefore this has to do with what one remembers and how one remembers it, and that's political. What does literature then recreate? What is created in the form of cinema, um, and it metonymically and deliberately draws in from the past. And to understand these slippages that are at work between subjective individual experiences as against um, macro level memory versions, it would be a good reference to sort of look at film texts like The Pianist, like the Pigtail, um, like the boy in striped pajamas, Schindler's List, which are in some sense to do with subjective memories, as against um, macro memories that are to do with documented facts and dates and timelines, and the slippages that are at work between the two, these subjective memories and collective experiences. That creates an identity construction of a certain kind, and that is the premise around which one could locate cultural memory studies.